It's a high-tech conversation
and a low-tech topic.
live on the World Wide Web via Zoom. Bench Talk 101.
Welcome everybody to this week's episode of Bench Talk 101. I have to say I feel absolutely privileged and lucky because we now have a team around us who are doing all the work. And literally I've just rocked up tonight and I'm just going to say hello and everybody's going to get on with it. So I'd like to just say a few thank yous really. Thank you to Shrenik who's taken over the emailing and the social media. So you guys have been having the messages out from Shrenik. Stephen has taken over the filming and the recording and the editing, which has been fantastic. And we've now got Mitch, who has delivered the first tip talk, which was our fantastic speaker of a couple of weeks ago, Rusty, talking about the sizing of glue within a chair to make sure you got some tight joints. So it's for me, I feel really great. And we have got Derek. Yeah, Derek is on here. Who's been passing over all the contacts. And I believe now we've got, with thanks to Derek and to Shrenik and Jim, we've got speakers right up till May. So happy days. It's really, really good. So there we are. So just for those that are brand new to us, we set up this not quite a year ago. It was May time last year for COVID. And since then, we've had 3 lockdowns. We are just about to come out of our third lockdown as a school educator on Monday, where we start back with all of our students. So on Monday, I have the task of making sure we have just over 2,000 COVID-19 tests taking place over the period of about a week. Where we then have to educate the students on how to do it themselves, and then afterwards they're going to be doing it themselves. So watch this space, and we'll let you know how it goes. I was very fortunate. I had my vaccine on Tuesday. I feel not too bad from it. It's kind of not really affected me. Feel a little bit of a tired and a bit of a headache, but very little really. Bit of an arm ache, but nothing there. My wife suffered a bit worse from it, so she's feeling not so good. But she's all right and pleased to have had it. And I'm sure that looking at you guys there, I'm sure that you guys have had it as well. Because I think we're now at the figures where I think I saw it's 39% of the adult population have now had the flu jab in the UK. So that's going at a fast pace, isn't it? Right. Anyway, so the best thing to do here, we've got our speaker tonight. We've got Rick, who's going to introduce our speaker. But just before we do that, just some protocols. If you just stay on mute, and then when we go into this, the best way to watch it is through speaker view, so that you can see the speaker up and big. And if they're showing off their slideshows or their products, you'll be able to see it there. The speaker will go on for 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And then after that, you've got questions. So all you need to do is put your name in the chat box. If you look at the bottom of the screen, you've got chat. You can just write your name in the chat, and then we just take them in order for the questions. So without further ado, I'll pass you over to Rick, who's going to introduce our speaker for tonight. Rick.
All right. Hey, everybody. So I don't really know how long I've known Mark. It seems like it's been almost as long as I've been woodworking. And I know for some of you, I think this may be your first introduction to Mark and his version of the Plate 11 bench. But for many of us, at least on this side of the pond, Mark is as much a household name as, say, Chris or Megan or Frank or St. Roy. I personally see him as one of the pillars of woodworking. And after tonight, I think you will as well. So now, after nearly a year of getting together for Bench Talk, it's time for us to get right down to talking benches. Mark Hicks.
Thanks, Rick. I don't know if I agree with your introduction, but I appreciate it. So when Rick invited me on, I was just thinking it would be an interview, and then they're like, "Hey, what's your presentation going to be about?" And one of the things that gets asked of me at least 3 or 4 times a year is, what do you think about going pro as a woodworker? Like, what is it? What do I need to do to quit my day job? And And there's really not a good place to talk about that in my website or on my YouTube videos. So, and I think that people who listen to this might have those interests, might be looking to go that way, and it seemed like a relevant conversation. So I thought I would kind of give a brief story of my professional woodworking background, and then maybe a few of the lessons that I've learned in doing that. So let me bring a few pictures up. In the summer of 2003, I was working as an estimator for a big construction company. We were building prisons and high rises and outlet malls, and I was working as an estimator, and I found myself fighting over pennies on these multi-million-dollar projects, and it just didn't feel real. It felt like I was working really hard to make other people rich, but I wasn't really enriching anyone's life. And the commercial real estate business was in a huge slump in the United States. So our company had gone through 2 rounds of layoffs, and I was one of the most junior people in the team. And it was amazing that I had not been fired yet. So I was talking to my dad about all this, my complaints and my worries and my job prospects. And I said, I'd rather just be making furniture or building cabinets. And he said, oh, I just talked to my uncle 2 days ago, and he's like 65, 70 years old. He wants to retire. He's got this tiny little furniture company in Missouri. I was living in Atlanta at the time. And he's like, you should call him and see, what you can work out. And I was excited and terrified. So after a few weeks of stalling, I finally got up the nerve to give him a call, and we set up a visit. And a week before I was supposed to come to Missouri for the visit, I got laid off. We had a 3rd round of layoffs, and I was out. And so I came to Missouri. I saw the shop. It was going to be a rescue. The buildings were old and run down, and the business had been kind of running on cruise control. But it seemed like a good challenge. And from the stories that I heard from my great uncle, it was a winner. It was going to be, all it was going to take was a little bit of work, and we would get it up and running again. And so despite some what are now very obvious red flags, I signed a mortgage and started working on buying the business. And in January 1st of 2004, I had a business, a furniture business. And I had let me get this. I had a pretty big shop. I had a finished shop. I had employees. I had lots and lots of inventory, and I had a whole bunch of debt. And not only that, but within 30 days of taking over, I had to borrow more money because my great uncle didn't properly estimate the amount of cash I needed to get things started at the beginning of the year. But he was my banker. So he was happy, he believed in this business. He was happy to loan me more money. And this continued for years. The business would gain a little bit, and then it would fall, and things just didn't really work out. And by 2013, I decided that I needed to serve a new market. We were working for the middle class, and the middle class wasn't buying our furniture. So I needed to go upscale. I couldn't compete with Walmart, and I didn't have the skills to go upscale. So I was talking to my wife, who was 7 months pregnant at the time, about this guy I had just discovered, Christopher Schwarz. And he could teach me how to use hand tools, and he had these great ideas on workbenches, and he had this class, but it was crazy. It's just 2 weeks away. There's no way I could go. There's these open spaces. And she said, you need to go. So I went to Mark Adams School in Cincinnati, just outside of Indianapolis. And I took this class on campaign chests with Chris. And, partly I wanted to learn some new skills, hand tool skills, and partly I was hoping to come away with a new product. But I was crushed when I found out that you can often buy authentic antique campaign furniture for much less than you would pay somebody to build it. But I was still learning. I was having fun. And over over beers one night after class, I confessed to Chris that I was going to build the glue bow workbench. And I don't know if you've seen this, but it's basically a laminated beam, like, I don't know, wafer board material that you glue into a workbench. And he, immediately insulted my my plan, and said, you're a real woodworker. You have real tools. You have big tools. There's no excuse to have that bench. You should have a real bench. And in fact, you should be making benches for other people. And that was really the kick that I needed. But he sweetened the pot. He said, if you can get it done, if you can get a prototype together, I'll let you put it in my booth at the very first Handworks in 2 weeks. So I ran home and got to work. I sourced the materials in 3 days, and I had a prototype of the kits that I was going to sell done and in the car and on the road within 2 weeks of getting home from that class. And so here it is in the foreground at the first Handworks. And it was probably not the best place to bring a workbench kit. The very first meeting of the most diehard hand tool woodworkers in America. But I did get a lot of feedback. I met some people. It was fun. It was a good introduction, and it was it made it seem like it was worth pursuing. So I got home. My son was born, and that was a great time. And the workbench business kind of sat on the shelf. And then Chris called me and said, "Hey, woodworking in America is coming up. You should come. And you should, bring your benches." And so I got a couple of kits together. I had found some new material suppliers. I had a better idea of the product. And I went to WIA, and I sold, I think, one kit, but I got a lot of feedback, some interest. I met Denis Polchowski, who's the guy who runs the hand tool shows for Lee Nielsen. And he invited me to come out on the road and do the Lee Nielsen shows in the United States. And so that was a great bit of exposure for me, but it still wasn't doing anything. People would see the bench, they'd be interested in it, but they weren't buying. So in the summer of 2014, I decided to build a pair of split top Rubos, fully outfitted with hardware, and bring them to Woodworking in America in Winston-Salem. And I sold them both. I sold one before I got to the show, and I delivered it, and then I sold the other one right off the floor. And things started really building from there. And so as that year drew to an end, the furniture company was kind of in flux. I was not losing money, but it didn't really seem sustainable the way it was set up. And I started considering, moving my business from this big shop that I was renting to my home, and putting it in a garage in the shop at home. And I was speaking to my dad, and, all this was kind of coming together with having a new son. And I said, Dad, what is your biggest regret as a father? And he's had a business his whole life, my whole life. And he said, I just wish I was around more when I was a kid, when you were kids. And that was all I needed to hear. I mean, I immediately started making plans to shut down this old business and move it home so that I could be here as my kid was growing up and coming and going from school. And I got some help for some friends, and we insulated the building and put siding up, put in the electrical, and moved everything home. I took a bunch of orders, moving sale orders from customers who just knew I was going to go out of business, no matter how many times I told them I was just moving. And after about 18 months, I got those orders filled, and I was basically prioritizing my bench customers and building furniture when I didn't have orders for workbenches. And then at some point, I decided to stop taking furniture orders. The bench business was doing okay, and my overhead was now almost zero. With my debt payments outstanding, I didn't have hardly any expenses to run this business. And then I caught the chair making bug, and I took a class with Jeff Lefkowitz and made a Boggs ladder back, and I was introduced to the world of shave horses. And I hated every shave horse I tried. And so I was back up against the wall with needing a tool for a thing that I wanted to do and not being able to buy it. So I started thinking, okay, what can I do to build it? It was the same thing with the workbenches. Nobody made a workbench with bench crafted hardware. And so I was trying to solve my own problem, and that led to another product. So by the middle of 2016, the shave horses were in full production. And then in 2017, in the summer, somebody dumped a load of tires in a ditch on the side of my property. And in the process of pulling these tires up out of the ditch, I inflamed my back. And in the process of getting treatment for that, I found out it was broken. I was missing pieces of my spine, and they don't know where they've been or if they've always been gone, but I was having some massive back pain. I wasn't able to stand for a few weeks. And it caused me to kind of reevaluate again, like, okay, what is my future going to be? And so I started thinking, okay, well, how can I continue to do this thing that I love and not endanger my health? And that's when teaching started to become a solid option for me, as well as some serious work on getting hardware kits and plans for my shave horses. So, that kind of led to a pivot, and I was able to actually get the back pain under control and get back to work. But I really enjoyed the teaching. In 2018, I published a schedule well, there's the kits, the first batch of kits getting ready to go out the door. And I got my first student in. He's actually gone on to found his own woodworking school, which is pretty cool. And then I actually had in 2019, the interest in the classes grew. I actually had a student who was blind, which was an amazing experience. This guy, David Albright, is such an incredible person and such a determined person. He didn't blink. I mean, he went through this week, and if you want to figure out how to teach, try to teach somebody who can't see woodworking. I mean, that challenged everything I thought I knew about teaching. And I came out the other side. And so, as I rolled into 2020, my classes were humming along, my benches were going good, my shave horses were killing it. And then, it was going to be the best year ever. And then it was pandemic. So that kind of brought me to where I am today. And I've pivoted again to teaching online. So I've created a kit, a workbench kit that ships out to the student. And then I have pre-recorded instruction that they watch on their own time. And then we come together as a group and discuss challenges, ask questions, solve problems. But so all of this is to kind of give you a background for some of the things that I always tell people. And when they ask me if I have time to go through it with them. And the first place to start, if you're thinking about doing this for a living, you got to ask yourself why. Why do you want to do this? What is the underlying reason for this change? Is it because you love the new work so much, or is it because you hate your job? Because you can find a new job anywhere that isn't your old job, and it doesn't require a lot of change in your life. Do you have to make a living solely doing this particular type of work, or can you, making a living doing it, or can you just continue to enjoy doing it as a hobby or as a part-time gig, as a side hustle? Because there are plenty of people who do that, and they're on this call. They do the thing that they love in their spare time, and they make income from it. Or at least they cover all their expenses as a woodworker and acquire new tools and travel and do things that they couldn't otherwise do if they weren't making these things. Is it just about getting paid to make stuff? Because that's kind of where I was. I just wanted to be close to the work. I wanted to use my hands. And if that's really all it is, then you could do that for someone else. You could get a job building furniture or making cabinets. There are people who will hire you, and they have, that are ethical and will treat you well, and you can make a good living doing that. Because owning a business as a professional woodworker or any crafts person is not just about the making. There are so many things involved that you do not realize you're going to get into, that you have to do it. And you have to really love the other side in order to put up with that stuff. So, just make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. And so I guess, when I first thought about buying the furniture business, I kind of had nothing to lose other than the debt. I just lost my job. I was young. I had no kids. So it wasn't that hard of a decision. I thought it was going to be, for sure, just going to be that easy to turn it around. It didn't turn out to be true, but it was an easy decision for me. I also was a terrible employee. I just don't follow directions well. I don't. I want to find my own way. I want to challenge the rules and and do things differently to see if they're better. Which is good if you're owning a business, not so good if you're an employee in a business. And then by the time the workbenches came up, I knew a lot more about what I wanted out of my business. I knew that I needed to actually be doing some physical work on the product on a regular basis. I knew I didn't want a bunch of employees because although I love training the employees and teaching them how to do the woodworking, I was terrified all the time about spending the time to train them, making sure that they got paid. It was, I was just afraid all the time when I was running the furniture business because there was no room to breathe. And by the time the bench making business came along as an opportunity, I had made room, and I was coming from a whole different place, and I wanted to keep that as my attitude for the work. Let's see what else. And then teaching just grew naturally out of the bench making. I mean, it was spurred on by the injury, but teaching is part of the business that I love the most. Is sharing with other people and passing things on. The next question you need to ask is, who are you trying to help? Is it you or is it the customer? Because the customer doesn't care about you, at least not at first. They are there to have their needs met. And if you don't really, really want to help them solve their problem, they're going to smell it and they're not going to want to do business with you. And if you can help them and you can help yourself at the same time, then that's how you succeed. And eventually they will start caring about you because, you put in the time, you put in the effort, they're going to want to give that back to you. They'll be happy to pay for your work. They'll know what it's really worth. And so I, as a furniture maker, always had a really hard time making connections with my customers. They were all, in a whole different place in their lives. Many of them did not really appreciate the work that went into the furniture. They were either basically driven by price, and that's a function of the market that I was in. And the ones that I do connected with, ironically, were people who did woodworking. They knew what was going on behind the scenes. They knew enough to be dangerous in the shop, but they didn't have the confidence or the experience to do it themselves. So they were willing to pay somebody to do these things for them. And some of those people actually followed me from the furniture business to the teaching side. They've become students since I've moved. So it's been fun to do that. Another thing and if you know who Seth Godin is, I don't know if he's popular, on the other side of the Atlantic, but you'll recognize this. And it's basically a couple of things. It's act from a place of generosity and start building your audience now. And those two go together really well. You need to, long before you take the leap, you need to start helping people online. You need to offer what experience you have. If you don't feel comfortable helping because you don't feel confident, then the very least you should start documenting all the things you're doing to learn and the successes you have, and even more importantly, the failures you have, because people will see your growth and they'll be rooting for you. And there's nothing better than people rooting for you when you're taking a big risk. And so I think that, that is a big deal. And you shouldn't be afraid to give away the things that you don't charge for. In my case with the furniture business, I was terrified all the time. I could give nothing away. If it wasn't the work, if it wasn't filling an order, I had no time for you. But I never really liked that. And as I got into building the workbenches, I got on Instagram early, and I started, posting everything. I decided that I was going to be completely open source. So I will tell people where you get lumber, where to get the hardware, how to install the hardware, how I drill this hole or route this opening. And it's because I don't get paid for that. I get paid to actually make the bench. Everything else is just knowledge, and sharing knowledge costs you nothing. There's nothing secret out there anymore. So it doesn't hurt you. It only helps other people. So that was kind of an ethic that I took from Christopher Schwarz. I mean, the guy, he makes furniture for a living. He writes books for a living, but he shares everything he knows for free first. So, and then the teaching just kind of, that grew, that was a natural segue. And I don't feel bad about giving away, the things that I put on YouTube for free, because I'm still getting paid to teach them how to build a workbench, the specific order of steps, the setups, the process. But sharpening is a core skill, and setting up a hand plane is a core skill. There's no reason for me to hold that back. They're not paying me for those lessons. They may get them as part of the class, but that's not really why they're there. I think maybe if social media had been around when I was running the furniture business, I would have started that sooner. But it just, it wasn't what it is now. The next thing I have is sort of a no-brainer, seems obvious, but it's hard for a lot of people to understand, is start living close to the ground before you have to. If you have a job now, if you're young and it's time to take risks, get out there and eat beans and, grow a business. But if you are, if you have a career and you're making a wage, start living off half of it. There's no guarantee that you're gonna fail at this. I mean, if you work hard at it, there's a pretty good chance you'll be able to make a living. But at its core, this is a lifestyle business, and part of that lifestyle is living modestly and enjoying simpler things. So, and if you do succeed, it probably won't be overnight, and it probably won't be a wild success. Everybody I see that has made a good living in woodworking has been doing it for a long time, and they've made their bones. So, when I was running the furniture business, the entire time I had it, I was the lowest paid employee, and our starting wage was $9 an hour. So, if you take the hours I put in and what I actually brought home, it was paltry. It was such a bad pay, but you do it because you love it. And then now I'm still the only employee, but my living conditions are much better. And I can be as determined or as lazy as time permits. So I don't have that crushing pressure of making payroll, all those things that I used to worry about. And then on the more practical side, learn everything you can about the product and the market before you make your change. You need to know what you're going to make. You need to go, how much is it going to cost? Where will you find the customers? What will they be willing to pay? I thought when I bought the furniture business, my uncle had all this figured out, and he thought he did too, but reality was totally different. We were losing money on every sale, I found out. The customers that had kind of drifted off, we thought we knew how to get them back, and that never happened. We were selling to a market that just no longer existed. And by the time I figured all this out, it was way too late. I had already signed the mortgage, and I was in way over my head. By the time the bench business came around, I mean, I had a pretty good idea what I wanted to sell. I wanted to make kits without hardware, so that people would have an easier time getting their workbenches together. And there are only so many woodworking magazines of any quality. There are only so many shows that I can drive to, but that's where I could find woodworkers. So I knew where to find the market. I didn't know where to find furniture customers. I tried everything I could think of when I was running the business. And I also, I knew exactly what every minute of time in my shop costed. And so I knew when I set the price on the bench, I knew exactly what I was going to make. And if the price ended up being too high, then people wouldn't buy it, and I could just move on to something else. I didn't have to stick with workbenches, but it was worth a shot. And then when I did the teaching, I had built 30 or 40 benches at the time. My process was nailed down. Again, I knew what my overhead was, and it was even lower than it was before. The customers would come from the same pool, but now I had access to those people who would refuse to buy a pre-made bench, but would want help building one. And I knew what schools charge for classes. So, it was a pretty easy pretty easy decision to do that. And I also knew that my most vocal supporter in Christopher Schwarz had just quit teaching workbenches. So it was a really good time in the market to fill that big space that he was leaving behind. Other things, make your mistakes quickly, make them early, and do it while the stakes are low. If you think you've got this thing that's going to sell, make it. Try to sell it, get it out there, but be sure that people are interested in it before you take the leap, and get it out of your head quickly. Put the least viable product out there, and do it before you're so emotionally and mentally invested in it that you can't just kick it aside and make changes and do other things. Don't wait for it to be perfect. The first bench that I took to Handworks was awful. It's coming apart. It's a parallelogram, so the legs, they lean like this. It's never been a problem, but it's nothing I could sell. And same thing with the shave horses. I mean, I put out a shave horse that worked really well, was a great product, but it was not perfect. It needed work, and I revised it and I made a new batch. And then I loaned one to Peter Galbert at the third Handworks, and he shredded it. I thought I had it dialed in, and he said, you need to change this, this, and this. These things are awful. And I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't had something to put out there. And that kind of leads into another thing, is when somebody who you trust and who you respect gives you criticism, you need to throw all your personal feelings aside and take it seriously. Because if they're taking the time to give you criticism that will make you better, then you owe it to them to honor that criticism and at least consider it seriously without getting your feelings hurt. And if you take that criticism and you evaluate it honestly and you include it in your work, that person will give you criticism again. They will see that their time was not wasted, and they will invest in you further. And that happened with Pete. He brought his idea for a height adjuster for the shave horses to me, and we incorporated it in my design for the kits. And it's made the kit so much easier to build. And it's made, now when I make shave horses for customers, I use it, and it's easier for me. And it solved a lot of problems for me in the process. And the very last thing is you need a partner. You can't do something like going out on your own by yourself. And I don't mean a business partner, because a business partner is kind of like another mouth to feed. You have to generate more income and more profit to meet their needs. You need somebody who's in your corner. So a friend or a spouse or a mentor who you trust and respect, who will back you off of a crazy new idea and challenge you to think about it thoroughly before you go down a massive rabbit hole. But also somebody who will encourage you when you start to talk yourself out of a really good idea, and who can kind of pick you up and get you back on your feet when you get kicked down. So those are some of my points, and I'm happy to take questions and chat.
Wow, Mark, that was amazing. So many wise words there, and it's nice that you've been so honest, with your story and telling us all what you've gone through. The resilience and the determination that you have, has obviously paid off with your passion for woodwork and what you're doing there. That's really, really good to hear. Really good to hear. Thank you. Right, so let's get some questions in. Up first, he's in there at most times. Strennick.
Thank you, Mark, for a brilliant talk. You put that together really well. You're talking about how you started off trying to produce furniture with your own business and so on. And I just wonder, with the rise of IKEA and other flat pack furniture, obviously that's a big challenge against someone starting a furniture business. But in terms of customers and so on, like moving on to workbenches, do you find more customers wanting to buy a made workbench, or are they more keen to, in general, are more customers keen to learn how to build one than buy one?
I think that there was definitely a lot of interest in the classes, and it took less time to turn that interest into paying customers. So, I mean, it's tempting to say that there's more interest in teaching the classes, but with the way that I started out doing the classes, I mean, it's a pretty serious investment in time. You've got 7 days plus travel on either end. So, if you don't have the lifestyle that can permit that, I mean, it's cheaper, the money wise, out of pocket expenses lower. But I think moving forward, that's going to be most of my business is the teaching. And that's because the market has changed. Benchcrafted came into the market with their own workbenches, and they've been selling the plans. My split top grew out of their design. I mean, I wouldn't call it the same bench, but it's definitely the same concept. So I think for me, there are a lot of people interested in building a workbench. I think, my T-shirt on the back has always said it's just a tool. It's not a rite of passage. But that's hard to convince people of sometimes. And so I'm happy to have them into the shop and let them go through it. I'll guide them. I'll be their spirit guide through workbench making. So, hopefully there's a lot more people wanting to learn than there are wanting to buy.
Do you think your current online style might actually become a future thing that you do alongside, your full-time week classes?
Yeah,
Because
I don't
obviously
think
it allows people to work at the same time, doesn't it?
Yeah, I don't think that'll ever stop. That may be, I'm not sure exactly what form it will take. It may be one of those things where, somebody calls me and orders a kit, and as soon as it's ready, it ships out. And then there's a series of videos that get released at a regular interval. And then everybody who's currently building a bench at whatever stage they're on gets to come to the class meeting, because that's an important part. I think, if one of the things that I've seen in online classes that people are missing is they get everybody together at the same time to give them a lecture. And that's what YouTube is for. Record your lecture ahead of time, do your demos, and then get together for that quick Q&A session, the thing that requires interaction. So I think as long as I keep doing it that way, I think people will enjoy it. We're just getting started with this first round. And so far it's going, just other than getting the kits to people's houses with this massive storm that came through, it's going pretty well. So I think that I'll continue it. It's what it'll exactly look like is hard to tell. So.
Good. Matthias up next.
I needed to unmute. Here we go. Thank you very much, Mark. That was a fascinating presentation and very, very interesting. I'd like to make a comment and then ask a question.
Okay.
So the comment is sort of, had I been 30 years younger than I am, I think I would, and had felt as I do now about my day job, I would have been seriously tempted to try to find a way to quit it. As it is now, retirement is sufficiently close on the horizon that I will stick it out and enjoy the advantages of a nice monthly paycheck and all of that. So, but yeah, I can very much see where you're coming from, and it's good on you for having made it. The question I wanted to ask, the thing is, I'm currently more or less halfway through a bench build.
Okay.
Yep, huge surprise. And I think you could call it a cross between the Bench-crafted split top and Chris's Anarchist's workbench.
Okay.
Yep, so Bench-crafted vices, but just a wide top, no split. And it's going well and all of that. I do, however, have a certain number of questions or things I'm thinking about and slightly worrying about.
Okay.
Would it be able to hire you for consultancy?
Yeah, I've talked to
the thing, I know Chris a bit. I could write him an email and he would answer, but I hate the idea of bothering the poor man who has by now basically answered questions on workbenches from Bob, Dick, Harry, and their uncles, and their cousins, and their nephews. And I think the man is probably fed up to hear with it. So if someone who knows what they're talking about and would be willing to charge me for the pleasure of answering my questions, that would be great.
Yeah, that's something I do. You just need to send me an email and we'll start talking about it. Yeah, I mean that's not a hard thing to do.
No.
And eventually, I hope to have all those questions answered already.
Yeah.
And where I can just send people to the YouTube channel or my website. But that's a long process. It's one of those things that you have to remember. Oh, I need to film this because I got a question about this. So, and if you're on a deadline for a workbench build, it's hard to stop. But one of my current remote class people was actually he was at one of the FORP builds, the French Oak Roubeau project builds. And his bench developed some major issues. He didn't get it assembled before the end of class, and he had all these problems. And he was actually going to fly me up there to help him finish it.
Oh, right.
Because he just, it's just, it's too hard for one person to work on a bench that size, but also, he just didn't feel confident trying to tackle it on his own. And I get that. I was there. That's one of the things when I made the pivot to workbench building that was really helpful with the customers is I could completely empathize with them, because even though I had all those tools and all that equipment and I had been making furniture for years, I was totally terrified of handling all that big stock and gluing it up and moving it around. I didn't know how to cut the joinery. And so, it was easy for me to be like, I know where you're coming from, man. I understand that it's scary, because it scared me too at first. So yeah, I mean, I'm definitely happy to help people.
That's great. In that case, I think you may expect an email from me one of these days, and then we can talk about the nitty gritty of how much you'd like to charge and all of that, and agree on a suitable consultancy fee. Excellent.
Yeah, so another great side effect of the pandemic is, just forcing us all to get onto this technology so we can use it like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Thanks, Matthias.
Thank you, Matthias. And there we were all thinking that you were retired already. Right, next up.
I bloody will.
Well, it's all right now, because Mark wants you to fly him to Belgium. So
that'd be great.
You'll be okay, won't you? Rusty, over to you. Oh, is Rusty still here? Yep, there he is. We can't hear you, Rusty. Oh. If you try and sort out your mic, and we'll come back to you in a minute. Whilst we're waiting for you, we'll go over to Steve.
First off, thank you very much. Early in my life, I did go out on my own, and I quickly realized that I didn't want to do the overhead, that I'd much rather work for somebody. And so after 35 years of working for the government, I now have a very good retirement. And now is the time to start a business or a small business, because you have an income and it's not going to go anywhere. And because I'm also getting Social Security, it's a very good retirement plan. So I'm still figuring out where I want to go, but mostly it's advising people, because I've also been doing historic restoration and reconstruction and buying of tools. And I've got a lot of knowledge of 40 years of doing historic research. And that's the business I'm thinking of getting into and some folks have said, why aren't you sharing this information? And so anyway, I really enjoyed your presentation, because it is right on. Having gone down that road, didn't go completely independent. My wife had her own business until she retired. So we've been living that life. And yes, I understand the baked beans and the hot dogs and the tacos and the real low cost eating and living, and you need to experience that to at least understand and appreciate where folks like you have moved forward and succeeded in it. And you also need to understand when to fish and cut bait.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I really, really enjoyed your presentation, and I thank you.
Well, so that your comment makes me think of two different things, and one of them is you said I was successful, and I think people need to really evaluate what success means for them.
Yes.
Because by all empirical measures, I am an abject failure of a business person. I don't make a lot of profit. I don't pay myself a lot of money. But that is not how I judge the success of my business. And so, obviously you have to live, but if I'm helping people, if I'm making a change in somebody's life and allowing them to do things for themselves, then, that's part of the success for me. And I've rambled and forgotten what the other one was, but yeah, it's you got to think about what your goals are, if you're going to do it yourself. So.
You have to be happy. Yep. Because and that's when I'm talking to young people when I do my historic presentations at the fort, I ask them what turns them on in life? What is their thrill? What do they love doing? Because if you love doing and you're working at what you love doing, then you're really not working hard. You're just enjoying life. And my father managed a lot of people in private industry, and his goal was to find the person a job position that you had to tell them, go home. There's tomorrow, go home, because they wanted to stay and continue working. And that is that's a life goal that I try and get. I support people 100%. And you don't have to be a millionaire, because you can't eat money. Yeah, you can spend the money to eat, but if you are happy what you're doing and you're enjoying life and you're having fun, that is the best world. And forget what other people say. If you're doing well in your own mind and you're just having a grand old time, and you don't want to come home from work and that kind of such, that's a successful person as far as I'm concerned.
Lovely, wise words. Let's try Rusty again, see if that works. Oh, it's still not working, Rusty. No. Okay. Tom, let's go to Tom.
Is mine working?
Yeah, yours is working. Yeah.
All right. Can I just say, he has a magnificent beard. I've just shaved mine off and I'm very jealous.
It's already growing back though.
Yeah, it doesn't take long, darn thing. I just wanted to ask, what made you finalize the design? I mean, I from making my first bench, which was out scrap and it looks okay, but it was a Paul Sellers design. I then said, oh, that'll be the last bench. And then I thought, I'll make another bench. So I made another bench and it was a lot better. But now I'm thinking, I kind of could improve a few things. I might make another one. But what made you finalize that? Because even the hardware choice is quite unique. And I've seen that before on the Studley bench, the H.O. Studley? The famous box.
Yeah.
Well, he had that spinning.
The tail vise.
Yeah, but on the main vise as well, you've got that, and I've seen that before on his. What made you particularly pick that over any other? Was it just the ease of build, or just the functionality of it, or what?
Well, so the thing for me was the leg vise. I wanted a leg vise and not a face vise or a parallel jaw vise, because of the simplicity of use and the speed of it. And as I the first kits I made didn't sell; they sat around, so I turned them into benches for the shop. And as I got to use a leg vise and a planing stop, I realized like these are two things that I could not work without. The tail vise, whatever, I mean, it's a great tool and it's handy, but it's not something I could, that I had to have in a workbench. But the design's not completely final. I mean, there's always little tweaks. So I have the advantage of being able to ship my tweaks. I can say, okay, well, I want to make this small change and this little iteration and see how it works. And then I can judge by the build, when it's together, whether it's a good idea or not. I mean, I started out using stub tenons coming up from the legs to connect to the base of the bench. And I really like those, but they were really time consuming to make. And then I saw a Lee Nielsen bench that had just this little tiny 10 millimeter dowel. It was longer than that, but this 10 millimeter diameter dowel. And I thought, well, there's got to be something to that. So I started thinking about it, and my design required a tweak. So the dowels I use are more like 19 millimeters, and they're 2.5 inches long, and there's 2 of them under the leg that has a leg vise because of the forces involved. But the design will never really stop changing. And I at some point will be going back to the stub tenons because of the way that I can make them now. But at the time, it was just a choice, So a lot of the decisions go into, how can I economically make it? Is it strong enough? How does it function when I'm done? What do the customers want? I mean, that's a really important consideration. I tried selling a bench with just a leg vise and a planing stop and could not move it. That market may come back around because Benchcrafted's doing that now. So they're doing well, I guess they're selling some of them. I don't know, but so yeah, I mean, it's a lot easier to try new stuff when it leaves the shop right away. But if you got to live with it for a long time, it's really hard to commit to to making those new changes. So iteration is key for settling on something you're happy with. So.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, I hope that answered the question. I'm not
sure.
Yeah,
thank you. Good talk.
Lovely. Sean, over to you.
Thanks very much, Jeffrey. Here's my mic.
Yeah, good.
Okay. Mark, that was awesome. Thank you very much. I'm actually not that familiar with your work, but I'm definitely going to go educate myself now. I have a bench that I was lucky enough to get relatively cheap used, so I've never had to build my own bench, but I'm the things I'm unsatisfied with are building up, so I'm definitely going to get around to it. And I've kind of devoured Chris's recent workbench book. Given how nicely you've spoken about Chris, this is a slightly mean question, but is there anywhere where your philosophy on bench design or building dramatically diverges from Chris? Do you have something where you're like, that's his way, but I think this is better? Or I'm kind of interested to see, is there I'm so immersed in his philosophy, I don't really know the other schools of thought, and I'm wondering if you'd have anything interesting to add there.
Yeah, so when the workbench book came out, the newest one, the Anarchist workbench book came out, I kept kind of a running total of like small disagreements that I had, because I thought, oh, this would make a great workbench, blog post. And I've never written them, but they're really small. I'm a fan of round dog holes. I think they make the most sense. He kind of abandons the idea of using a sliding dead man between the legs. And I actually don't think that the bench vise hardware is good enough to replace that. So I would not leave that out of a workbench. I think, and this a lot boils down to what you're working on. I think a tail vise can be really useful for certain people. Like if you're carving seats for chairs by hand, you're using an adze or a scorp, having a tail vise is really handy. But I also think that you need a row of holes across the front edge of your bench, whether you've got a tail vise or not. And this is something I can attribute to Rick, putting those dogs in, this far apart and leveraging a part between them is really fast. It's faster than putting it in a vise. It's faster than, clamping it in your leg vise or your tail vise. So now that I've learned to work that way, I wouldn't do without that sort of, that little modification. And he's a huge fan of solid top benches, and that's all well and good when you live on the ground floor. But I think for people that have basement shops or upstairs shops or hard, difficult ways to get in, making a bench that breaks down and can be carried in pieces is a really big advantage. So I'm a big fan of the split top, and I like the gap stop. I use it all the time as a tool rack and as a as a stop. So I have a hard time living it without one of those in a bench as well. But it's not; those are all kind of small things that depend more on how you work than whether you like woodworking or not. So.
Well, the split top's a pretty significant difference.
Yeah.
When it comes to building.
Yeah, it's more work.
So I'll definitely look more at.
Yeah,
thank you very much for that. That was great.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Lovely. Rick, over to you.
All right. So, Mark, thanks for agreeing to come on,
No
despite
problem.
my lies.
There's no lies. Lies of omission.
So, I can say just on what you're saying there, having a split top, I don't really love functionally the split top, but I wouldn't have this bench in my shop if it wasn't split top. So it's one of those things that that it's like you were saying, a small issue. But I got this bench into my basement by myself through a very narrow stairwell and a hallway, which wouldn't have happened with a non-split top option. I'm wondering, are you able to show what the bench looks like if you were to ship it to a customer? Because I was just kind of thinking about, normally, like if you order a hand plane or whatever, great, we'll throw it in the mail for you. For a bench, it's a little more of a serious issue. Are you able to show any of that on how shippable they are?
Well, I almost. Let me. So the crate, and you guys will have to convert to metric because I can do furniture measurements in metric, but not crate measurements. The crate's 87 inches long. It's about 18 inches high and 27 inches deep. So it's basically the footprint of a 7-foot long workbench, but it's only 18 inches high. So it breaks down into, you have the two halves of the top, you have the end assembly, so front leg and a back leg and the stretchers on both ends. You have the chop, the vise hardware, and you have the long rails that connect the two ends of the bench. And all the hardware is kind of tucked in around there. It's been fully assembled before it leaves the shop. It's functioning, it's finished, and then I break it down to ship it. But I use hardware connections to do all that. So it's really, I have a video, actually do have a video on YouTube that shows how to assemble your new workbench. And you can actually see me open the crate and pull the parts out and put it together. And I mean, it would take me 30 minutes to build a bench out of the crate. But I have behind me, I have, the pieces of one of the kits for the class, but it's in a much earlier stage than, a completed workbench shipped in a crate. This is the front half of the bench, and you can see the cameras. I'm filming the installation of the tail vise right now. Yeah, I mean, go to the YouTube video. It's Plate 11 Woodworking on YouTube, and that's probably the most popular video I have. I wish, as 1/10 of the people who watch that video would order a bench, then I would be busy for the next 10 years. But yeah, it's there. One of my very earliest videos. So forgive the editing and the voiceover.
Lovely. Brilliant. So Rusty typed his question in the chat. He was going to ask you about teaching benches or teaching chairs, and if one were to start teaching, how does one get others like Chris Schwartz to promote them?
You don't get Chris Schwartz to do anything. He just has to kind of decide on his own. I was lucky. I was in the right place at the right time, and I was ready to move when the opportunity came. I think that if you want to teach anything, it's a lot like, this discussion we just had. You need to start building an audience, and you need to get fans. And the way to do that is to share your time in the shop, and show people that you are someone they want to learn from. Because 90, I don't know, half of it's really important when you spend a week in someone else's shop that you can get along with them. And so if you put yourself out there in an honest way, and you teach people, and you don't teach them how to make a chair, teach them how to make something else, something that you don't want to charge for, a little stool, or or some other related piece of furniture, and give that away. You could sell plans. I mean, that's another way to make a living off of giving away your teaching, is you sell the plans, and then they use your teaching on the internet to build it. If you can build up a small fan base there, and you can get 1,000 true fans, as they say, then you can get a few of them to opt up for a class. And it really, you just have to wait. I'd been building workbenches for 5 years before I started offering classes, and I'd been on Instagram that entire time, and had built a following there. And even then, the first year, I only had like 5 or 6 students. So now chair making is a little more popular right now, so you might be able to capitalize on an increase in demand and not enough supply. But the other thing you can do, which Curtis Buchanan is really good about here, is he brings people into apprentice. So find somebody who's already teaching chairs, who's open to the idea of training the next generation of teachers and chair makers, and be upfront with them. Say, I want to learn how you teach. And I'm willing to promise I won't teach your chairs, but I want to learn how to teach a chair, and I'll teach my own design. And that person, if they invest in you, and you treat them well, and do your best for them, they'll be the one who promotes you. So I think going to a class, getting a suggestion, and coming back 2 weeks later with a fully functioning prototype did a whole lot for me in Christopher Schwarz's eyes. He knew that I was worth the effort. And so it's never stopped. Whenever he suggests something or offers an opportunity for me, I do everything I can to make it happen. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
I think it does. I mean, that's so many good words of advice there. And I think anybody watching this back on the YouTube at the weekend will be able to sort of make many notes, and maybe take that leap of faith that you have, and go into it for themselves. So Mark, thank you very much for giving up your time to share your knowledge and to educate us, with your experience of what you've done throughout your life, and kind of where it's taken you to today, and having that confidence to speak to a bunch of random guys from all over the world. You probably heard from the accents that you've got lots of different places represented here tonight. This is where we get everybody to unmute themselves and to raise their bench beverages. So we make a toast to Mark and the bench.
To Mark. Well done.